So, we have an all-star panel up here of customers and partners, or partner, singular. And I understand that the coffee ran out an hour ago, so with that in mind, we've put together a sort of different panel format for you today to keep it a little more engaging. We have put together a set of questions which are designed to create controversy and engage the panel here in some debate. And what we're going to do is I'm going to read a question or a statement and treat it like a debate resolution. And we'll take a quick poll of the panel and see where they stand, if they agree or disagree with the statement. And then they'll fight it to the death. And at some point, I'll cut off the debate, and we'll then ask all of you to vote and raise your hands. And you'll probably have to shake your hands a bit for me to see through that light. But then we'll move on to the next question. And at some point, we've got a couple of roving microphones, and we'll get a chance for you all to ask the panel some burning question that's on your mind and get a result. So without any further ado, let's get started. I know you're all eager to get to the next step of tonight's show, which is, of course, Matt awarding the prizes. So we'll get started right away. So our first challenge is should you, when you're developing your BPM projects, start with data first and then build the process models? So, panel, quick poll. Yep. Who agrees with the statement?
Absolutely.
Yes?
Yes. I agree. Completely agree.
You all agree?
I would have to disagree.
Okay. All right, Sergo, why don't you go ahead?
Well, first of all, it does make sense to think of your data first and build some basic functions like add, edit, delete before you go into the process models. But in reality, you don't know everything ahead of time. You cannot really afford to do all of your data first before you move to the process models. So you can do only that much. The best approach we found at Crawford is agile, iterative approach. You do pay attention to, you start with the data and you move to the processes pretty fast. And beyond processes, you pay attention to the user experience, security, process optimization, things like that. And then you go back into the data, records, and go into the iterative manner. So in a way, it probably agrees to it, but at a smaller scale. Bigger point is to go into the iterative process and kind of repeat the same cycle. That's the whole point.
All right. But Sergey, surely isn't the whole purpose of a process to do something with data? So if you don't understand essentially what's happening in the process, which is all about data to some degree, you're sort of starting off and you're following through exactly how it's done at the moment without really understanding what the purpose of the process is, surely.
Yeah, that's true. You start with the data and then you end with the data. But the whole point is that you cannot afford to spend a lot of time on designing your data or building your records first before you go into the process. From the design perspective, what we found is you do have to address all of those up front. You cannot ignore security either, for example. That's another thing I would say very important to have it up front, or the user experience, or the process optimization. While you do naturally start with the data, in my mind, you move on quickly to process, to others, and then you come back in iterations. You don't know everything ahead of time. Pretty much expectation is that things will change. You'll have additional data points,
Matt, Anand, you have to let him get away with that?
Yeah, I agree with him. And to some extent, what he's saying is no different in terms of the starting with data first. I think the key thing that he pointed out here was that short cycles. So you do lots of short cycles. So within the cycle, you of course start with data, but you do the process, then get back to the next cycle. So the short cycle part is the part that I think makes this work. What the converse of this would be that you start by first defining all the processes and then figure out what data to load in. We used to do things like that, but I think more and more people are not doing that anymore, and this makes more sense today.
So, I mean, from our perspective, if we didn't have the data or the data elements that we wanted to interact with, what processes would we have? I think that a result of building the process models is more data, and data that you weren't necessarily thinking about to begin with, right? But when you're starting to think about building an application, you really need to stop and think, what set of data, if you will, do I want to interact with? So in our organization, it's all about a member. So we need to understand that data element that is a member and build processes around how we're going to interact with that data element. So to both your points, I mean, you're both right. Short iterative cycles and the ever-growing amount of data that comes out of this. But to me, if you don't sit there and take a look at the data you want to work with, I don't know how you even start to think about the processes you want to build.
I think I have a more fundamental view of this, which is, and I think I said it yesterday, is that I actually believe that the whole purpose of process is either to create or transform data. You could say, okay, if you extend that and say physical objects are also data, just happen to be real rather than virtual, then I think that applies. And I think sometimes if you want to really achieve transformational change, what you almost need to do is say, well, what is it we're trying to achieve with this? And that inevitably is either a transformation or a creation of a piece of data. And then what's the most efficient way of doing it? So you almost work back from the data to the process.
All right, well, audience, who agrees with this statement? Raise your hands. All right, I see a couple more. Some over here. All right, and who disagrees? And, gosh, it looks...
I can't see in the light. I don't know who won.
Is it possible to increase
It
the
looks
light?
like a toss-up.
Is it possible to increase the light in the audience?
Can we get the lights turned down a little bit? But anyway. Or maybe the house lights turned up a little bit so you don't all fall asleep back there without us seeing. But that looked pretty even. I think we're going to have to call that one a toss-up right now. Move on to the next